With that being said, there's a lot of things in Scripture that we easily forget. Just like it's easy to forget those who have served our country, have given their lives for our freedom. It's easy to forget that, and that's why we have moments in time where we honor them and show our respects. But there are also things in Scripture that we often forget and we overlook, and we think, yeah, that's said in there somewhere. And maybe one of those things is our response as Christian people, as followers of Jesus, our response to orphans and widows and those who are the least of these. It's easy for us to forget what we are supposed to be called to and how we're supposed to respond because we get caught up in life and everything else going around. Now, this morning is what is called Stand Sunday, and Stand Sunday is a Sunday where we remember, where we're challenged to think about what is our response to orphans and widows, and how should we care for them? What is God expecting of us? Because we easily forget our role and what God has asked the church to do. So this morning we're going to be reminded of and maybe challenged to take a step of faith, to respond in obedience to something that God is going to say to your heart this morning. But for a little bit more background about what Stand Sunday is and what it represents, here's a quick video.
There are 30,000 children that are in the foster care system today in the state of Texas. There are 500,000 children that are in the U.S. that's in the foster care system. And I said, who would stand with me today for these kids? That day, Nedra Wade, she stood and raised her hand and she said, Pastor, I will. And then another person stood and said, I will. And another stood and said, I will. And another stood and said, I will. Well, after the process started in our church, and family after family, within 3 months, 39 children were placed in families in our church. Jesus, Jesus. What if there was more families waiting for children than children waiting for families? So we called Child Protective Services. And they said, if that happens in any county, that will be the first ever. Jesus, oh, for grace to trust Him more.
My name is Joe, and this is Daneen, and we are very, very average. In fact, how average could we be that my name is Joe, right? I'm 5'9", she's 5'3". We have a few strengths, and we have a whole heck of a lot of weaknesses. We struggle as parents. It's challenging. We see so many others that make it look so easy. Others who just seem to love every minute of it, of being a parent, and we find ourselves glancing at the clock, wondering when nap time is coming or when bedtime is coming so we can have a reprieve. I'm sorry, it's the truth. It really is. All right? Maybe some people from the outside looking in might look at us and think that we're good parents and that we have it all figured out and that we were born for this, but that is not the truth at all. We were both single until the age of 37. We kind of got used to living life by ourselves, doing what we wanted to do, when we wanted to do it, in our own routines, and so on. So we became parents much later in life. We made a decision, though, several years ago because we felt strongly that God calls all of us to foster care, to help the least of these, and to where we can help. And so fostering is something that we feel God has called everyone to in one way or the other, and we're going to talk about that, I think, a little bit later today. But we've tried to be obedient to that calling, even though it hasn't been very easy for us. We knew we'd be less than perfect parents, but we felt we had the ability to provide a safe, loving, and structured home to kids in need. Since beginning this journey about 4 years ago, we've had 11 different foster kids in our family, from newborns to teenagers to sibling sets of 3 and 4, some that stayed for 2 weeks, some that stayed for 6 months, and one that stayed now for almost 3 years. We don't do it for ourselves, and we're not trying to do it to build our family or to satisfy our own needs. We do it to serve others and ultimately to obey and to follow what God has called us all to do. I want to share a couple of stories with you. The first one is a story of a little girl named Kyla. We were asked several years ago by an expectant mother if we would be willing to adopt her baby, her unborn baby. She was going through hard times in her life and didn't feel like she would be able to give her the life that she deserved. And so we agreed, and we started through this process of adoption. Well, about 2 months before she was going to give birth, she changed her mind, and she decided that she wanted to keep the child. We were pretty heartbroken about it. We had already started preparing our minds, and we'd started preparing things in our home for this little girl, but we also understood. But on the day of the birth of Kyla, Child Protective Services, CPS, removed her from her mother. And so we were called, and within a couple of days, we were up in Great Falls at the NICU, spending time with her. We got 2 weeks there in the NICU to get to know this sweet little girl, to love on her, and to help her get healthy enough so that she could be discharged and be able to come home with us. We were with her for the first 6 months of her life and fell in love with this little girl, and our minds began thinking once again about the long-term possibilities. But then we received another phone call, and we're told that her birth mom was in a better place and that they were going to come and take her back to her mom. A few days later, 2 men came in and took this precious baby away from our house, and it was one of the hardest days of our lives. We shed a lot of tears over the next few weeks after that she left. But we kept reminding ourselves that we were being obedient to God and that it wasn't about us. We gave Kyla a great start to her life, and we loved her like she was our own, and we wouldn't trade those 6 months that we had with her for anything. Let me tell you another story. A couple years ago, and several kids later, we were rejoicing that we finally got pregnant after having tried for many years. It was April of 2018, and we were expecting our first biological child in November. We got another call from CPS saying they had a baby from the Fort Peck Reservation who was 2 months old and who needed a home in eastern Montana. We did the math, and we realized that if we carried our biological baby to full term and we took in this other boy, that they would be 8.5 months apart, Irish twins. Whew. Yeah. That makes a couple of 42-year-olds pretty nervous, pretty scared, and pretty tired thinking about trying to raise 2 babies at the exact same time. But we dove in anyway. We weren't sure we were ready for it, but we did our best. Shortly thereafter, they brought this little 2-month-old boy to us that had a bigger head than mine. And we raised him as our own and quickly fell in love with him. It eventually moved towards adoption, but it took a long, long time. There was a lot of doubts and uncertainty, but we were glad that it was eventually finalized this past July. What if we had said no to JoJo because we had our own baby on the way? Or because we were afraid of what happened with Kyla would happen again? And we could have made a million different excuses why it wasn't the right timing and it wasn't the right decision to make. What would our lives be like now? How much joy has He already brought to us, as well as so many other people in our family, in the church, and even at the college? Who else could have better broken in these new carpets by running up and down after service every Sunday afternoon? Who would eat all those donuts out there if it wasn't for JoJo? What would we have missed out on? But you know what? It isn't about us. It's about these kids. Where would he have ended up? How would it have affected his life? How many more kids out there are just like Kyla and JoJo? They might need a family for a week or a month or a year or even a lifetime. If average Joes like us can do it, I know there are many sitting out there who can do it as well. It's hard, it's messy, it's extremely uncertain, and yet it's so rewarding. And God meets you right where you are, and he provides exactly what you need.
Yes, it's true that God gives you what you need. And the cool thing is that God uses other people, thankfully. He uses people to help us and to come alongside to us. After all, it takes a village to raise children, right? Well, we are so grateful for our village and for this church who have surrounded us, who have wrapped around us during our foster care journey. One of the most practical ways that this church and our friends have supported us in a number of times has been to provide a home-cooked meal when we received a new placement into our home. Those first couple of days are just chaotic for us, for the new children, trying to adjust to things. And so the times that people have brought us meals so that we don't have to think about what to make, we don't have to take the time, and instead can just focus on adjusting to a new life and a new routine and a new normal, has been a huge, huge blessing to us. So we want to challenge you to think seriously about what it is that you could be called to do. As we've shared, we really believe that the gospel calls each and every single one of us to do some sort of involvement with foster care or adoption. But it looks different for everybody. And there's no tier, as you can see in this image here, it's a circle. There's no tier about if you do this, you are greater in the kingdom of God. But every piece that someone can play is an equal part. For some of you, you do love to cook, and you're great cooks, so it looks like providing for meals. Some of you might have the gift of being a shopaholic, so perhaps your gift is shopping for some diapers or new clothes or bringing groceries to the family. Some of you just love spending time with kids, and so maybe for you it's to help with babysitting or respite care. And this is needed for sure for the foster parents to have a break and to go out on a much-needed date night, but it's more than that. It's during the day. It's taking the children to appointments, to court hearings, even to parent visits, especially if a family has more than one child at home. It becomes very difficult to have to, you don't want to have to, just imagine, it's January, it's 10 degrees outside, you have 2 kids, 2 toddlers, an infant, whatever it might be. You don't want to have to load them both up in the car just to then take one into a doctor's appointment. So if you have a flexible schedule, or you work from home, or you're retired and you can help out during the day like this, that is a huge, huge need and a very practical way that you can help. But maybe you enjoy working with older kids. You can take the time to mentor a teenager or an older child, and then just be a positive influence in their lives. Maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking you're not a kid person and you don't cook very well, and that's okay because there's still a place for you. Maybe for you, you can mow the lawn or rake the leaves of a family. Again, anything you can do to provide a service or an opportunity to do something so that the families can then be freed up to be able to have the time and the energy and the focus to pour into those children in their home, that is something worth doing. And I definitely can't forget the power of prayer and the need for prayer for these foster families. So if all you can do is sit at home and pray, sit at home and pray. But go beyond that and take that extra time to send an encouraging note to the family, or whether it's a text message, a phone call, whatever, and just let them know that, hey, I've been praying for you today. That means that it just will encourage them to know that others are standing with them throughout this journey. And now a lot of, we've even heard some cool ideas about people who own businesses who maybe offer free services or discounted products. We've heard a story about a mechanic offering free oil changes to foster families, or the local restaurant owner who provides a free meal or even provides meals for when the foster care community gets together for their support groups. So there's a number of ways to help. And most of these ideas I've shared are ideas for how to support the foster family. And so you might be sitting there thinking, well, but what about the children? Isn't this about the children? Yes, it absolutely is. But like I said, anything that you can do to free up time and energy so that the parents with the new children in their homes can pour into those children, then that is a benefit. Just use what God has given you with whatever time, talent that you have, and use that to support foster families and the children in foster care. But let me not stop there, because I really think that there are some of you in this room that are at a place where you're capable and ready to invite children into your home. You're ready to be a foster family. And so we challenge you to think about that. One of the things we love about our church is that it's multi-generational. And so there are people, whether you're an individual or a family, and you are at every place in life here in our church. So, but regardless of where you are in your life, whether you're wrangling 2 and 3 and 4 kids in your home, or your children are grown, or you're a single person and work full time, there is a place for you to consider if you are ready to step forward and be a foster family. It is needed, and it can make a difference. 3 years ago, we had a teenager in our home. She was 15 years old, and she was only stayed with us for about 2 months, but it was an impactful time for her, I think, but also for us. And we've stayed in contact with her for these past 3 years and been able to still be a part of her life. I remember even after she left our home, she had a challenging journey ahead and moved to a number of homes. And there was one time I remember her calling when she was in a group home, and the phone number came in from an unknown number, which I normally don't answer, but I answered. And I remember that she wanted a recipe for the soup that I had made when she had stayed with us. And so I found the soup recipe and I gave it to her. And honestly, did she really want that soup recipe? Did she make that soup? I don't know, but I don't care. She knew that we loved her and that when she called, we would answer. And that's what it is all about. There were even some times when she was living with family members and we would be texting back and forth, and she would just, on more than one occasion, just mention, I miss being in your home and I miss being around positive people. Because she had figured out that just by being in our home, being a part of our family, being around the people that were around, were a positive influence in her, and perhaps maybe more positive than what she was around because of her birth family. No fault to herself. And some of you in this room even made an impact on her. In fact, I can remember she's even asked about Cassie, our fearless and wonderful worship leader. At the time, Cassie and Andrew were leading the youth group here at our church. And so Cassie took the time to personally invite her to come to youth group. And she went, and I think she had a pretty decent time, and she connected specifically with Cassie and some others. And that was enough of an impact that, again, when we would talk later on, she would ask, how's Cassie doing? So this is a message for even you high schoolers and middle schoolers out there. You don't have to wait till you're an adult to make an impact in the life of a child that needs a little bit of positive influence. Invite that person and become their friend. Invite them to youth group or just to your home and just be a positive influence in their lives. We truly all can do something to help support foster care.
My name is AJ, stands for Arthur James, and I am 10 years old. Probably my sisters. They're funny and cute at the same time. They're like the only ones so far I've let in my heart. One of the only ones. Family means to me like somebody that you can depend on, like you can put your trust in, like because they love you and they're trying to help you. They're there for you. And I know this because I've been through many stages of parents. They haven't treated me very well, so I have lots of experience. And so I know what family means pretty well.
morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Larsen. My wife and I got involved in the foster care system 8 years ago. When we first moved to Glendive, my wife worked for Child and Family Services. I was principal in an elementary school, had to make lots of calls to Child and Family Services for kids who were in difficult situations. My wife got another job, and then we decided to get involved in foster care. Now, we were going to be empty nesters. We currently have a daughter, Elizabeth, who is 27. We have a son, Dalton, who is 22. Dalton was in high school at the time, but we were preparing to be empty nesters. That wasn't God's plan. And through obedience, we chose to get involved in the foster care system. We have had 3 kids at a time, sometimes just one child. We've had children for one day sometimes, and we had 2 kids that we only had for one day, and now we have a wonderful young lady who lives in our home that we adopted 4 years ago now. And it's been a tremendous experience. I know one of the things that I felt when I got into this was, what am I getting into? It was a little bit of the fear of the unknown, to be honest with you. What is this going to look like in my home? Am I going to be able to handle this? One of the things I worried about was dealing with the behaviors of some of these children, because some of the kids that you deal with have been through a lot of trauma, and their behaviors are probably different than your biological children. It's probably something that you're not quite always prepared for. And having been an elementary principal and being a teacher for 18 years before that, I had dealt with kids who were difficult to deal with sometimes, and I wasn't sure how I would deal with those behaviors in my home. I was a high school, middle school teacher. They were with me for 45 minutes a day. I sent them off to somebody else. Hey, now there's somebody else's problem. Don't have to worry about it for a while. We're good. And so one of the things that I know I was most concerned about was, the ability to really be able to love and deal with kids who came from trauma and probably had behaviors that I wasn't exactly prepared for. One of the great things about the Child Bridge Ministry is that not only does it find families, it equips families through tools, through training and relationships to help wrap around foster families, to help deal with those things. One of the things that Child Bridge uses is called TBRI, and I had to type this out, so I got it right for the first time. It is called Trust-Based Relational Intervention. And it's a strategy that you use with kids who have been through trauma to meet their needs. A lot of kids who have been through trauma don't trust adults. And they have a lot of reason not to trust adults, obviously. And so it helps you, through building relationships, be able to deal with those behaviors. Because let's face it, a lot of kids that come into the foster care system have broken relationships. They are broken through relationships. And the only way for them to be restored is through relationships, and for somebody who will give them a loving and trusting relationship. And so that is what Child Bridge does to help families meet the needs of families. There's a statewide resource group that meets once a month for training and a time to share. It is taught by a TBRI practitioner. It's followed by a breakout session where you have time to visit with families specifically who are in eastern Montana and have foster children, so you can share with them and share stories, but also share how to apply the training that you've listened to and how it works out in everybody's home and with different children, which is really wonderful. There are some families in our community that do not attend this church but attend other churches who have 30-plus years of experience dealing with kids from trauma, and it is wonderful because you can learn so much from them. There's also focus group, which is kind of a small group study, and right now they're doing a book study, and Child Bridge has focus groups, so they've got a statewide resource group, a focus group, and then Eastern Montana has a family engagement coordinator named Chrissy True, she's from Miles City, who specifically works with families in Eastern Montana. So if getting into foster care and opening up your home to somebody, to other kids is something you're thinking about, and you think that kids will be just placed in your home, and then, oh my gosh, now what am I going to do, and how do I deal with this, and you're going to be alone, you definitely won't be. There are resources that Child Bridge has to help and wrap around and guide you through that experience.
Picture with me. Slide. You're 6 years old, and you're watching out for your 4-year-old sister. You've been caught sneaking into people's houses to steal food because you can't find enough in the garbage can to keep your belly full, while your only parent is selling your family's food stamps to buy drugs and alcohol. Or you're 5 years old, and there's a knock on the door, and you're told not to answer it, but you do anyway. And at the door is the drug task force and a social worker, and they come in to find your mom with a needle in her arm, and your life will never be the same again. Or picture being 4 years old with a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old sibling and a little baby sister. You're in a hotel room, and your mom leaves you there to go chase her next high. And while you're there with her boyfriend, he ODs. And you're left to care for your siblings and the baby with a dead body in the room for over 12 hours until the authorities find you. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow. Deuteronomy 10:18. These are real stories of children in eastern Montana. And they're connected because a God-serving, ChildBridge-supported family stepped in to care for them. ChildBridge is a faith-based nonprofit that finds and equips foster and adoptive families for Montana children who have experienced abuse and neglect. We have over 3,000 kids in foster care in Montana, and ChildBridge exists because there aren't enough foster families. ChildBridge expanded to eastern Montana, east of Billings, 2 years ago. And in that time, we went from about 10 families that we worked with to over 50 families. That's why Christy True, her position now exists, because I was recruiting and doing the equipping piece, and it's grown, but we still don't have enough families. Children in eastern Montana are living in group homes. They're living in foster homes with 6 or more kids, and they're living in a modern-day orphanage. Really, we still have an orphanage in eastern Montana. We can do better. We can do better, church. A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families, and that's Psalms 68, 5 and 6. Not in group homes, not in orphanages, but in families. And I think I can safely speak for Joe and Daneen and John and I, saying that we share this quote by Jason Johnson. We know things now that can never be unknown, have seen things that we can never unsee, heard things that we can never unhear, and felt things that we can never unfeel. Nothing will ever be the same again. Nothing can. Folks, again, breaking news to follow Joe. We are in spiritual warfare. That shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. Incredible spiritual warfare right now. Even as Christians, with Jesus as our guide and the Bible in hand, we all struggle with a me, myself, and I mentality. We all do. And I dare say, Satan is getting a foothold in our lives, in our country, and in our church, because we're so self-focused. And what I'm going to talk about today is the opposite of what's good for me and what's good for you. Because as we know, it's not about us. Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And that's in Matthew 25:40. Foster care is irrational. Why would we, as rational human beings, step into the messy? Why would we willingly become involved in trauma, knowing that it could affect our spouse, our marriage, our family, our biological kids? Why would we lean into the broken with no way of knowing how to help or how it will end? The answer is simple: Jesus. That is exactly what Jesus did for each of us. Without the gospel, choosing to enter into the hard and difficult makes no sense. As Christians, we are to live counter to our culture when it conflicts with what the Bible teaches. In our world, our culture, and our sinful self, we say, avoid hard and broken things at all costs. We strive to live comfortable lives with the least amount of pain and suffering as possible. Don't we? That's why COVID's been so hard, because it's really put a wrench in our lives. We want to grow deeper in our walk and relationship with God, but prefer it not come through hardship. We want to share the message of salvation, but not if it's awkward. And we want to spread the gospel, but only on our timeline and at our convenience. Yet God sees broken people in hard places, and he steps toward them, not away. We serve a God who saw us where we were and stepped into our life. God said, I see you where you are, and I'm coming after you in your brokenness. I am broken by your brokenness at the cross. I'm going to be wrapped up in your brokenness. I am broken by your brokenness, so you don't have to be broken anymore. What if we reframed our whole attitude and posture about hard and broken things? What if we flipped the narrative of the world? The gospel is the opposite of our natural inclination to step away, avoid, and isolate. What if we become the kind of people who move toward hard things? What if we made the decision to enter into caring for kids in foster care because of our identity in Christ? Identity is simply defined as a set of values and beliefs that makes one person or group different from others. If our identity is rooted in the gospel, we move forward on what God lays on our hearts, knowing he's going to give us the courage and the strength to move forward because of our obedience. Even when the costs are high, because that's who we are and that's just what we do. There's nothing special about us. There's nothing special about anyone that does foster care. We're just being obedient to what God has asked us to do, despite the cost to our comfort. In our lives, we make decisions based on outcomes. We count the costs and then decide how it's going to impact our life. If I decide to buy a new car, I have to think about the cost, literally, what it's going to do. First of all, do I need a new car or do I want a new car? What's it going to do to my savings account? How it'll affect the amount I put towards retirement? But if I make decisions based on my identity as an adopted daughter, and you as adopted daughters and sons of Christ, we still count the cost, but then we filter it through an entirely different set of criteria. Will the cost for me be worth it for someone else's benefit? My decision to tithe and support other ministries is based on my identity in Christ and my obedience. Yes, I could use that money for something else, but I have filtered the decision to tithe through a completely different set of criteria than buying a car. If we ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to create? What kind of world do we want to live in? Next slide, please. This was on Focus on the Family a few years ago, where this little boy walked into church and asked if someone would adopt him. He said, I'll take anyone, old or young, dad or mom, black, white, I don't care. I would be really appreciative. I'd be the best I could be. And there are kids all over Montana that that's their sentiment. And we're not doing enough, church. We're not. God cares about our faithfulness. What does he ask of us? 1 Samuel 15:22 says, "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams." When we focus on God, we know he is pleased with our faithfulness by entering into a child's broken story. It's not about the outcome. Again, our world measures outcomes. We raise our kids. They grow up to be model citizens, good students. They go to college, get a great job, never move back home. That's really funny in our family. Not so much. Get married, give us grandchildren, and never be a problem or have a problem. If they do experience trauma or hard things, they should be able to overcome it with no residual effect on anyone in their life. Confession, that's what I thought. God cares about our faithfulness, and the healing comes from him. You will have much to learn about caring for a child from hard places, but what we are doing in the lives of these kids has eternal significance. We are faithful, and then we leave the results to him. Matthew 25:23 doesn't say, "Well done, good and successful servant." It says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." We fix our eyes on Jesus. No one is strutting their way through foster care. What do foster kids need? Well, this is straight from the state's website. Foster parents must be at least 18 years old. There is no maximum age. There's no maximum age. You have to be 18. You have to be physically, mentally, and emotionally competent to care for children. You have to like and understand children and be in good general health. That's where the maximum age comes in. Are you in good general health? And then there's some other, pass a background check and get your home studied and all that good stuff. But those are the general requirements. What kids in foster care need to know is the invaluable worth of being fully and unconditionally loved, whether it's a day or whether it's forever. As John shared, ChildBridge equips families on this journey through education, tools, and relationships, so you won't go it alone. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. That's James 1:27. This verse isn't a command, but it's more of a description of what a pure and undefiled reflection of the gospel looks like. It's getting involved with the most vulnerable in society, and at James's time, it was orphans and widows because they couldn't take care of themselves. That's what it looks like to put the gospel on display. Today, when you came in, you should have received an interest card with your bulletin. If you didn't, there's some more out there on the table. This is the third time that we've done Stand Sunday, and we are very privileged and honored to be able to get the whole service to talk about this. And I told Joe and Daneen and John that I really wanted to press in this Sunday because this is our home church, and you guys have had a front row. And I want you to prayerfully consider what God is asking you to do. Not rationally, but based on our identity in Christ. There's many ways you can get involved, as Daneen said, but I would encourage you to fill out this interest card. ChildBridge exists because of donors. We preach the gospel, and so we don't accept any government money. And so if God would lay it on your heart to become a monthly donor, There are envelopes in the back, and you can fill that out and say that you want to be a monthly donor or a one-time donor. But when you become a partner with us, you get our newsletter. And Star and our family have been featured on the back of it for the last 3 issues. And it's just a little blip of her story and the things that she missed out early in life because she was in foster care. She didn't learn how to ride a bike until the end of kindergarten, and she was a big kid. Like, it's hard to teach a big kid with training wheels. That was hard, super hard. But there's a really, really cool story in this episode, or this issue, of another Petersons in Glendive, Tina and Kevin Peterson, and how they stepped into foster care, and these girls were reunified with their mom, and how the mom has become part of their church. They've discipled her, and they're forever family, but all of them, not through adoption. And I have a few copies back there. If you put it on your interest card, I can email you a copy too. Worship team. Worship. That was for Cassie. She requested that. I'm going to leave you with a vision I have. Imagine if 3 families in this church said, despite the fear, despite the irrationality of it, I want to move forward and learn about foster care. What if 3 families did that? And then 2 families for each of those said, we're not in a place where we can do foster care right now, but I'd love to be a foster aunt or uncle or grandma or grandpa. And they just wrapped around those kids. Not just a little bit, but really poured into those kids. Especially a family like Joe and Daneen, because they don't have any family here. And then 2 more families said, I want to be that support that shovels their walk, brings them a meal, does babysitting so that they can focus on their marriage. I want to wrap around them. What a beautiful picture of the gospel that would be. You know what? My real, deep, true dream is that we would become the Brown County of Montana. We would be the county that has so many foster families that it's just a phone call for a social worker to call and say, hey, we need a family, because they've got such a huge list of families. Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah. Let us not love with words or deeds, but with actions and in truth. 1 John 3:18. Please come talk to me afterwards. Thank you.